was up there today, and at lunch I was speaking to a group, and they said they heard something.
Yeah, I'll figure something out.
Ready? Everybody ready? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Welcome to the last City Council meeting of January. I'd like you to join me as we stand to do Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and that'll be followed by a moment of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome again to the meeting of the Lincoln City Council for January 28th, 2019. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the room. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an agenda should come forward after the clerk has read that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, and those in opposition, then those in opposition. The applicant may make a short rebuttal statement after that. Each speaker should begin by stating their name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor planned for a future agenda. Having said that, I'd like to ask the clerk to call the first item for us today.
We do have one announcement. Due to the President's Day holiday, the City Council will not meet on Monday, February 18th. We ask those of the general public coming forward to testify to please clearly state your name, spell your name, give your address, and sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Testifiers may use either microphone, and there is a sign-in sheet by each microphone. We ask city staff who are testifying to please state your name, title, and the department you work for. Our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to speak on those items? Seeing no one coming forward, can we proceed?
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Items 1A and B were introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Christensen? Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then items 1C, D, and E, and 2A were introduced by Christensen.
So moved. Second?
Have a motion by Councilman Christensen, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Seeing none, would you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then, we'll go on to our public hearing resolutions. Item 5A, B, and C are all related. They are service agreements with Jonathan Benson for professional golf management services at Mahoney Golf Course, Timothy Rowland for golf management services at Pioneers Golf Course, and Dennis Vance for golf management services at Highlands Golf Course.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, can you help us understand what's going on with golf courses here?
Good afternoon, Lynn Johnson
A lot
with
of
Lincoln Parks and
turnover there.
Recreation. I apologize because I was looking around obviously for the golf professionals this evening.
They're golfing.
Yeah, and thankfully they are here. There are 3 action items before you this evening, and these are continuation of service agreements with our 3 golf professionals for a 4-year period through January 31st of 2023. And as we just saw, Dennis Vance from Highlands Golf Course is here. I think Jonathan Benson is here from Mahoney Golf Course, and Tim Rowland from Pioneers Golf Course. As with the previous agreements, the golf professionals staff and manage the golf clubhouses. They collect green fees and cart rentals on behalf of the city. They provide food and beverage service for golf-related merchandise for sale, and they retain the proceeds from this business. The golf professionals are responsible for providing player instruction and for securing league and tournament play. They manage the driving range and split the revenue with the city. They get 90% and the city gets 10% of that revenue. The compensation that is provided through the service agreements is incentive-based, and it's similar to the prior agreement. The golf professionals under this arrangement, they make more money when the city makes more money. The golf professionals under this agreement, they get a payment for each round played at each of the golf courses. They get a percentage, as I mentioned, of the golf cart revenue, and then they get 90% of the driving range revenues. The golf professionals are reimbursed for a percentage of credit card fees assessed for sales at the course. And the prior service agreement provided or included an incentive payment based on achieving a target number of rounds. The approach on this version is slightly different than that. This is really kind of a revenue sharing approach. And this agreement does include profit sharing, a provision regarding profit sharing incentive pay when the golf course will receive, when the golf professional would receive a percentage of the revenues when certain thresholds are met. And I'd like to note that the structure of these agreements was reviewed by a committee of our Lincoln Municipal Golf Advisory Committee, and they recommended approval of this structure. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have this evening.
Councilman Eskridge.
Yes. Thank you, Len, and thanks, guys, for being here and what you do. So Len, a couple of years ago, we had a community group come together and study the golf program and evaluate what we were doing right, what we could do to improve things, and give us maybe we should ask them, give a quick assessment as to what's the state of Lincoln golf right now, would you say?
You know, I think we've implemented an awful lot of the recommendations that came through that. One of the significant recommendations was to put a golf CIP surcharge in place. As you may remember, and as hopefully the community remembers, one of the challenges that we have with golf is that we really of late anyway, we've been generating enough revenue to cover the operating expenses, but not generating enough revenue to cover infrastructure repair and replacement. And so one of the recommendations that came out of that golf committee was that we establish a dedicated fee that then would, CIP surcharge fee, that would be directed to and specifically used only for infrastructure repair and replacement. And we've done that, and actually we probably have about a third of the need funded every year through that. We're actually proposing a 25-cent increase in that this year to continue to kind of incrementally work towards getting more and more of that need for repair and replacement taken care of. As we discussed at that time, and it continues to be true, a significant need is that we're saving for, working toward, is replacing the irrigation systems on kind of a phased schedule at each one of the courses. We did make some significant progress at Pioneers. The pump station was replaced a year ago. I would note that one of the things that was recommended through that study was that we take a look at the structure of each of the service agreements that we have with the golf professionals, and try to figure out if there was a way to make sure that it's fair to the golf professionals. We want to retain qualified, experienced golf professionals, but we also want to make sure that we're getting the best deal for this city. And that was part of the intent of sitting down with the group from the Lincoln Municipal Golf Advisory Committee and run this structure past them. And they felt like this approach, this incentive-based approach, where the golf professionals really only make money when the city is making money, was a good approach, and that the kind of the balance of revenues seemed equitable as well. So they were very comfortable recommending the approach that's before the council this evening.
Okay, thank you. And the in some of those meetings that we had, there was a great interest among the golfing community, and certainly a lot of loyalty, I think, to Lincoln Golf, and particularly to the staff and the professionals that we have here, doing a great job.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, and I would echo that. One of the things that we do every year in June is we do a golf satisfaction survey. And every year, in fact, the level of satisfaction has increased, but the level of satisfaction with the clubhouses, the condition of the clubhouses, the services that the golf professionals offer is always very good and continues to actually incrementally go up as well. So
Great.
we're pleased and proud of that.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Mr. Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we took all three of these together, so we're
So,
ready for voting.
If-
Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to speak on these agenda items, these three resolutions? Make sure I cover all my bases here. I think we're good there. I think it's your turn, Teresa. I'm gonna stop
if not,
talking
we
now.
can vote on these items then. Item 5A is the service agreement with Jonathan Benson, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. 5B is the service agreement with Timothy Rowland, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 5C is the service agreement with Dennis Vance, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Camp, second by Eskridge. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are our public hearing ordinances second reading and related resolutions. Item 6A is the purchase agreement with PS&Y LLC, whereby PS&Y assigns to the city its lease of property generally located at 1330 N Street.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, and the applicant in this case. This is the Eagle Garage. It's located on 14th Street, and it is part of a strategy to bring parking resources to that area of downtown that's been identified as the highest priority area in need, and that is the southeast quadrant. If you were to take a look at, and I think you can see it here, our downtown area, this is 13th Street, and this is N Street, O Street, and P Street. Here is the Larson Building Garage. This is the University Square Garage. Here's Center Park. Here's Q Place Garage. This is the garage that we've purchased from the Sharp Building folks and the surface lot. If you see the southeast quadrant, it is devoid of parking resources owned by the city compared to the other quadrants of downtown. This is in our ownership and operation now. It is our hope to obtain the garage that's located at this location. It is a garage that's been open for a number of years. It has had a good deal of use. It is used by people and businesses in the surrounding area. It's 340 stalls, but the building is old enough that it is compromised and is in need of serious rehabilitation to maintain the future of the use as a garage. If it doesn't get used as a garage, it would probably be demolished and turned into some other development. And then they'd be saying, and where's our parking, City of Lincoln? The current operator is here, Dick Young, and I think he'd tell you that private enterprise has not reached out and said, sell us the garage and we'll operate it. Garages have not been a moneymaker for other parts of the industry, although there are some private garages in downtown Lincoln, but there hasn't been a new one in 50 years, or almost 50 years, I think. I think the 70s was the last time a private garage was built. And the reason is you don't make money on garages much. You can over time, but it is not the rate of return the developer wants for prime downtown land. The city has the obligation to provide parking in the downtown under B4 parking. And we intend to purchase the rights to this location for $1,870,000. That is the appraised value. It's not higher, it's not lower. It is the appraised value in the appraisal that was done by the Great Plains Appraisal Corporation. It will allow us then to do the work for restoration, meet ADA standards, and to get what we hope to be another 30 years of life for this garage. What I can tell you is that if you think of this as a system, you have along 14th Street, on each of those 4 blocks, a city asset. If you have a system and if we can secure this operation here. It also means that all of these are within 2 blocks of each other, and that's important because when we have special needs or if there are certain circumstances and we can't use one garage, we can move business to another garage for special events or the like. In other words, treating it as a system allows us to harmonize and use the whole system to meet interlocking civic demand. And we're at high usage at all of our garages. It's not like we have lots of empty stalls, but it means that this operation between garages is all the more important. And here in the southeast quadrant, this we think is a very valuable asset for us to control. This garage, in my estimation, and I'm speaking here with the fact that the engineering reviews that have done would substantiate that, does not have a future as a garage without this kind of rehabilitation. We will lose this garage. So to preserve this garage, the city's in a position to step in, take over the control of the property, and be able to secure its next 30 years of use. DLA sees that fact, and in fact, their executive committee recently voted in favor of this. You would have gotten an email from Speedway Properties that said, we care about downtown, and we need parking in downtown, and this is a good idea. Our other employers would do the same. One last word before I answer questions. When you take these 4 blocks, it's important to know that people as users in the literature of parking are likely to walk up to 750 feet, and then they say, where's the next garage? I want to turn around and go back to my car. That's too far. But when you take these 4 blocks and you separate out the 750 feet, we're talking about these blocks, and ones that don't appear in the map over here, as well as these blocks. In other words, the system would overlap itself and create an efficiency that we think would be good. The total cost of the project will be made back by our estimations. We won't be losing money here. We'll make some money. But I don't think the goal should be that we're going to be a big revenue producer. It's that we won't be losing money on the project. We'll make some money, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to meet demand, and this demand exists, and this resource, in my estimation, and according to the way that we think in the planning and the parking services, will go away if we don't preserve this parking. And there are plenty of businesses, as you can see by the location of this map, that rely on the availability of parking in this quadrant. What questions can I answer for you?
Councilman Camp, do you have some questions?
Thank you, Mr. Landis. On this, you said the purchase price would be $1.875 million, and that's
8.7. Oh yes, 1.87, not 85. I'm sorry if I said that.
Okay, thank you. And that's to purchase the existing lease. Is that correct?
And the personal property. That's right.
What personal property would there be?
Well, I mean, it's a garage.
The property.
Let me not overstate it.
Talking about like
What
the
we're going to
arm that
get
goes
is
up-
32 years of that garage. We'll own that garage for 32 years. We will not have permanent ownership. Can I tell you a little about that story?
Please.
Don't you hear me? Sure. This was originally owned by a single woman about 4 generations ago. She's passed it down in her family, and there are now 48 owners in 5 different time zones. buying from 48 different people in 5 different time zones is itself a headache, and probably would probably mean that the building and safety department would be called out before we would ever be able to get the job done. It took us 4 months just to get them to say, we agree that you may continue to send us the same checks you're always sending us into the future without change, just from a different person. Now imagine trying to negotiate with 48 different owners. It can be done. What it can't be done is quickly. And this opportunity, I think, is quite likely to elude itself unless I were to bring this council the desire to do eminent domain. And I've never gotten a signal that the city fathers have wanted us to use eminent domain to take care of the problem of downtown parking.
So you're saying for the 1.87 million, we're purchasing a 32-year lease?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of that time, what happens?
At the end of that time, we will have 32 years to make other adjustments. If not, that's the end of our legal authority, if we've done nothing between now and then. By the way, our goal is not to get another 60 years of a 40-year-old or 50-year-old garage, because we don't think it's there. Our goal is to get 30 years of life, and we'll accomplish that.
Okay. And how many stalls again?
340.
And you mentioned restoration. I don't think I heard you say how much the restoration will cost.
The restoration for concrete only is about 4.5. Add in the elevators and it's 5.2.
And how would that be financed?
We will bring a request to use our bonding coverage, and it will be part of our parking strategy. So we will be back to you with a request to do a bond for parking needs. Our parking coverage and resources are sufficient to pay those bonds, and our revenue stream is sufficient to support probably a total bond of about $48 million. But that would be to cover downtown parking needs in wherever they might occur.
Now, I thought I was somewhere recently where you said we only have enough money for 2 more years, and after that, we won't have any money to do any more garages.
No, I think I would have said 2 garages, but I'm not sure I said 2 years. I think we're conflating 2 different facts. Out of $48 million, you could do this project, you can do our Sharp building project, and then there still will be some resources that would allow us to consider some portion, or perhaps, depending on how much it costs, another project. And there are potential claimants for that. The South of Haymarket has claims on that. The capital area has some claims on those resources. But we will have the resources to do this. We'll have the resources to do the Sharp building block, and we will have some additional resources. But that will exhaust our bonding capacity for... My son will have to be the Urban Development Department Director before we get into the time in which we could consider that. We'd be into the 2030s before we could consider another bond.
So with the additional funds left over, you haven't defined that. So after if the Eagle goes through, you've got the Sharp lot, and you've got the renovation and all the restoration costs, how much would be left out of that 48 million bonding capability?
We have cash as well. So if everything was to be a bond, we may have another $13 million for a project other than the Sharp building and the Eagle garage.
And what does a typical project cost? I mean, you're talking about 20 to 25,000 per stall?
We built the Lumberworks liner garage for about $14 million.
But we own the land.
We did.
And so
That's
land-
right. And by the way, help me solve that problem. Finding willing sellers at bargain basement prices in downtown Lincoln is hard. In fact, I haven't found a way to do that so far.
Okay, what I'm just trying to look at though is, yeah, if you got 13 million, you got and land acquisition isn't going to be inexpensive, and so that 13 million is not going to do another project.
In the event it was part of a development that could use the TIF money from another project, if our resources over time, remain strong, we have a very strong revenue stream at the moment. We're doing well.
That strong revenue stream is what would support up to 48 million more of bonding.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't use that revenue stream twice.
Right, and I'm saying that those things that allow us to project for that rate, in the event we were to do better than those projections, we would have additional resources.
I think some of those projections are aggressive increases in parking rates.
They do include parking rate increases about once every 4 years.
Okay. So you said the goal is not to make money, but there would still be surplus funds. How much do you think there would be?
Well, if we use the numbers that I gave you, and if we did our analysis, this garage would net in revenue about $11 million.
For
We'd spend
32
7 to do
years.
this. Yes. In other words, we will not operate at a loss. I'm not saying, oh, by the way, what a great moneymaker this is going to be for us. I'm not saying that. I am saying that our revenue is greater than our costs in our analysis at this time. That's our best guess. What we're going to do is we're going to keep parking in a critical location for businesses. The chief beneficiaries is not our reserves. The chief beneficiary of this are the businesses in that surrounding area who are either now using it and are going to lose that parking or are looking for parking. And as you can see, this is a relatively significant area. If you take 750 feet, that is P Street to O and O to N Street and N Street to M Street, and from 14th to 16th and from 14th to 12th. There's a lot of businesses in there, and that's what we're supporting.
I don't deny that. I'm just trying to look at the financials and to see on this how that works. What type of interest assumptions have you made in your financial calculations?
If you would like me to provide that between now and the time that you vote, I will. I
And,
can't do it off the
we're-
top of my head. What I don't have is another more realistic strategy that gets us resources in the time frame that we will need this by, considering the life of this asset. It's a private asset now, but to become a public asset.
No, I realize that. I'm, again, getting back to the finances here because we've got a responsibility to our taxpayers and citizens on that regard. So, I mean, you're talking about 7.2 million with the elevators and the land acquisition, or the land lease acquisition, excuse me.
5.2 million.
I'm sorry?
5.2 million
No, that didn't include the purchase price. That was the
and
renovation.
1.8
Yeah, so it's basically,
7 total.
it's a little over 7, so. Anyway, and what happens on the first floor, retail and office space? Does that included in this, or does that stay with the present landowner?
We will be the landlord, and we will hope to fill it with active edges, just like we would under the downtown master plan. We have parties who would like to come back to this location under redevelopment purposes. We've been in contact with them, and we have established relationships with the existing retail users. There are 2 of them, a travel agency and a printing shop. One of the things that we have is we have a garage in the next block that has the need for active edges on the first floor. So the city has some resources that we might be able to bring to bear to assist with either a relocation permanently or temporarily.
I'm sorry, you said on the other space where?
Sure, in the garage which we recently purchased here.
Wait for it, bam.
Did I?
A little early.
Okay, so
That one.
this is
No.
the Sharp building. This is the garage to the south, and these are the surface lots.
So you've got empty
So
space there.
there's there's first floor retail space there that in the event, if we could make use of that, it would help us with a transition.
How, we've tried to encourage, we've had some downtown standards that encourage office or non-parking use of first floor space. Unfortunately, that hasn't been as successful as we had hoped. There's some areas sitting empty.
There are. And in fact, we've stopped saying retail as much in reflecting on what the civic value of that is as an active edge as opposed to retail. In other words, it may not be a soft goods store. It may not be the hitching post or the wooden nickel, but it might be a daycare center. It might be services that are there. The goal of that active first floor edge is the pedestrian experience, so that their eyes on the street, open doors, transparency, the sense of safety that it comes when you are in the heart of a civic area. If you think about areas that don't have that quality, they are a little ominous. If you take a look at the state garage across from the Pershing area, and you think of walking that block, you just don't want to. You want to turn around and find your car and drive someplace else. It's that sense of vibrancy that gives you a sense of safety, which is why we would ask for active first floor edges in a way that 2 or 3 years ago we would have said retail. And we've updated our language because if you can get that quality of the safe pedestrian experience, it doesn't have to be a retail use that creates that.
And I appreciate that. I want to be realistic, which it sounds like you're getting more realistic in that. I don't know that things like a daycare center can afford to be there on the rental spaces, and they don't have the open space that's required under state law for a daycare center. So, and I just see all the vacancies. So I don't want to make all these assumptions that may not have as much merit to build your case here. I think you're going to end up with some empty space. And I assume out of that income stream, you're also counting some office rent or whatever first floor rents.
If you want to provide a request for our analysis, I'd be willing to do that. What we've basically said is how much is it going to cost to do our purchase of the lease? How much is it going to cost to create those 340 stalls at ADA standards and upgraded with new elevators and the like? And how much are we going to make back for the rental of those stalls? And then what does that do to our bonding authority? And where does it fit in our bonding authority? And that is the level of analysis that at least I've been engaged in, to make sure that we are getting a reasonable rate of return for investing in that asset at that location.
Okay. So with that in mind, why couldn't the private sector do that?
The private sector wouldn't make money to do this. I did the analysis of what would it take if you wanted to do a 10% rate of return. I think that's not an unfair use for a private sector analysis. You would charge $262 a month for a stall of parking.
3 times.
Now, if our demand's that great, somebody might pay $262. But I did it on the back of an envelope, and if you wanted me to try to justify that number, I could. I did it at one time asking myself, if you were a private sector person and you were buying that and trying to get a rate of return that would be equal to that kind of investment, which you could get in many other forms, what would you do? And what would you charge for that? And that's roughly the math. Now, I specifically went to law school because there's no math in law school.
Well, you didn't take tax classes. Business law and some of those have that. And there is even a business accounting course. So,
Councilman,
I'll defer some other questions. Thank you.
are there other questions from the council? Councilman Eskridge.
Yeah, just quickly, Dave, I mean, it's my understanding that typically the private garages, for the most part, that we have downtown, they're one use, right? They're used for the business.
We have had some private sector parking created.
Right.
It is in support of the development that they're going to do.
Yeah.
And so what they do is they secure their own very available resource, and it adds value to the development that they're doing. What they don't do is open up their doors to others to say, come in to use our
And
stalls.
that's a major difference with the city garages that might turn over a stall 3 times. I don't know what the average is a day, but multiple uses of that
Yes,
stall.
it is. They usually have for the employees or the residents of that location. And the most important thing for our consideration is they don't add any resource to anybody but that owner. You have to go back a long ways to find a garage that was done that in fact sells stalls. They exist. If you're at the Noyes Art Gallery on 9th and O, there's a private garage there. And you can rent a stall in that, as my father did for many years. But it was built years ago, and it has not been refurbished with new update and maintenance because of the way that how much parking costs. It's hard to do it. And if there's anybody in this room who knows how hard it is to be a private sector owner of garage spaces, it's not on this side of the dais. It's somebody up there.
And parking,
Big you.
you talked about the bonding and how we pay for this. So I mean, we have a parking enterprise fund. So we also just had the golf program, which, you know, it's another enterprise fund. So whatever goes into in the receipts of parking lots, then that's what goes into paying for improvements or purchasing new parking lots. So there's not other money that comes in, with the exception
You won't
maybe
find
of the TIF.
in your city budget a line item coming out of the general fund for parking. We are an enterprise fund. We pay our own way, and that's high risk. Not every city can say that. There are plenty of cities who have support for parking in some other forms, including general fund, because they lose money on parking.
And you, as Director of Urban Development, which is oversees parking, I mean, it's to your benefit to stretch those dollars as far as they can possibly go. You aren't going to want to be spending money that you couldn't be spending on other garages in the future. I mean, you're wanting to make this
This
as
is the
economical
nexus between the highest area of demand for downtown. Remember how much we've done for West Haymarket. Notice that there are 2,500 new stalls out there. That's great. But this is the heart of downtown, and there are plenty of existing businesses, and this resource dies and goes away if we don't protect it and preserve it.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from the council for this testifier?
I would like a clarification. On my
Briefly,
parking lots, I do rent to non-tenants substantially, but I just want to have the parking capabilities. But
Absolutely, and you've been there since the very beginning of the return of the Haymarket.
thank you.
Which is a reminder that the private sector sellers of parking are long-standing and a little long in the tooth at
Careful,
this point.
careful.
Speak truth.
Thank you.
Speak truth.
Thank you, Mr. Landis. Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak on this agenda item? I think it's your turn, Mr. Ogden.
Hello, members of the council. My name is Todd Ogden. I'm the Deputy Director for the Downtown Lincoln Association, 206 South 13th Street, Suite 101. I'm here today to testify on behalf of our governing board of directors. We voted to approve this purchase agreement last Tuesday, July 22nd, for 4 main reasons. So really, when we looked at it as a staff and a board and looked at all the deals we've talked about here, first of all, there have been past parking studies done that recognizes that the southeast quadrant of downtown is in much need for parking. And that's why in the past we've come by with the Sharp lot. The city has acquired that to build potentially a garage there in the future and have been looking around for other spots for years. So that's first and foremost. We really need a garage in that part of downtown to help balance the system. And that leads to the second point. We really need to balance this system. The Larson garage was very successful when it went into that part of downtown to help alleviate University Garage. And our favorite part about that is we have first hour free, and that's our heavy retail zone. And to support that retail, there's retail parking on the first floor, It's getting harder and harder to get that now in that quadrant because more and more employers that are coming in are using that spot, which tightens the retail parking. So this helps balance that system. So not only do we want to have this space available if large employers come in looking for parking, but we need it for retail balance. Now on N Street, there's not as much demand for retail, but we could balance some employers, which the city's allowed to do since they have the other properties along the area that Dave showed you, that they can then balance more employers to this garage and alleviate more retail parking for the other two garages up north in more of the retail heavy zone. So that's another reason we're for this. With high demand, we do understand we would love if a cheaper deal came across, a deal that we could own. Right now, we've needed this garage for a while. We can't afford not to have this. If a large employer comes in again and a couple large employers, we need to be able to secure space for that. So this is something we can acquire. This is something that does seem clear that probably would not become a garage again. And that's something we find important. This is a really good spot. It's hard to find space downtown, especially in this tight core of downtown, that's going to be public parking. And that amenity is vastly important. And that brings it to the final plan, as we just adopted our 2018 master plan. And in that plan, section 4.3.8, it calls for this specific plan to happen. So we did just adopt that plan, and it does call for this transaction, in which it's kind of part two of what was approved a while ago with that sharp garage. And this allows better balancing for when that is developed for people in that lot, which happens to also be our offices, to be able to move into other space into this Eagle garage and vice versa. As well as what Dave said, there's some retailers that can move around temporarily from one area to the other as well. So it does support those first floors during this transition, which we appreciate. So those are kind of the main points, and I'd like to answer any questions if you have some for downtown Lincoln.
Questions for this testifier? Appears not. Mr. Ogden, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, shall we move to our next item?
Sure, we'll go on to items 6B through D. This is approving the Lead Place Residences redevelopment agreement, authorizing, or amending the fiscal year 18-19 CIP to authorize and appropriate up to $5 million in TIF funds, and authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds, all for the Lead Place Residences redevelopment project.
Hello, Mr. Landis. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Bargain basement appearance by the Urban Development Department on the rack. And my wife fell on the ice today and fractured her shoulder. I'm not sure which of us is going to have the harder day. I think it's going to be her. My best guess is, but we'll find out depending on what you think of our work on this score.
See how you do.
Yeah, that's right. Don't get cocky, isn't that the point?
Performance-based, yeah.
This is the Lead Place project. It's 20 stories high. It's the second highest building in downtown Lincoln. It's in the notch, the Applebee's notch of our garage. Originally, it was there because of our original design, and the Lead Center basically said to the city, fill that up with something, please, because it's not a finished part of the garage. We'd love to have something neighborly, and it's taken us a while, but we think this qualifies on that score. The project is 20 stories high. The first floor is for lobby use and a restaurant. The restaurant space is about 3,000 square feet. The second, third, and fourth floors are commercial office space, Class A. That's about 4,500 square feet. And then floors 5 through 20, 16 floors, are for about 40 1-, 2-, and 3-bedroom condominium units. So we're talking about ownership here. The space of the project area, this is where the building will be, and this is Q Street. And this is 12th and 11th Street, and of course the alley behind. This is a block that will allow us to take a look at Q Street with fresh and new eyes. and gives us opportunity to see if we can do on Q Street some of the wonderful things we've done on P Street. And so, this is the building's northerly face. This is as if you were looking westerly, but from across the street. It shows you this east-facing wall of the garage. Garage. I've got that on my brain, don't I? I've got a picture of the south side of the building. And then this is as well another, I believe this is a westerly facing look at the building. The reason I show you those pictures is because there are windows on all four sides. If you go to the Haymarket, for example, and you look at the buildings that are there, they have rather graceful brick facades. Walk down the alley and you'll see the back of those buildings, because those are oftentimes one- or two-sided buildings. They're not four-sided buildings. That's what the alleyway looks like. It's the back of house. It doesn't look like a four-sided building visible from all locations, which is why there's an attention to the aesthetic here and the use of glass and higher-end construction. The project itself will ask of the city 100 stalls of parking. Some of those are to be for commercial use, and some of those are to be for residential use. There are 60 residential users and 40 of the commercial use. We intend to cluster the residentials on the 5th floor close to the entrance space. They will be reserved, and they will pay the market rate for those reserved quality. There are some stalls already that are in this building. The Embassy Suites has some valet parking. The Kindler Hotel will have some. But we have 809 stalls in the garage, and we, in analyzing our demand and analyzing our attrition rates over time, believe we can meet the needs of this project and also continue to serve this downtown area. In the 8 years that we've managed parking services as urban development, we've never asked anybody to move out of a garage unless they don't pay us. In other words, we've never said to somebody, you know, we're going to build a new building next to you, and we need those stalls because we promised them to the building. Would you please move out of our garage? We've never done it, and we won't have to do it here. We'll be able to acclimatize this demand against the natural flow, ebb and flow of the use of the building. It is about a $30 million project. About $5 million of it is in TIF funds. The first priority is our issuance and our administrative fee. The second one is $450,000 for streetscape. This will be something that the city pays great attention to, something we very much care about. We're going to be able to have a broader sidewalk than what we have now. We will be closing one lane of traffic. It will allow us to have a generous pedestrian space, and it'll allow us to have a loading zone. That block is in fact an anomaly. The block to the east is 4 lanes, the block to the west is 4 lanes, and this one block is 5 lanes. So our Public Works Department says that we can make the transition to 4 lanes without problems, and it will allow us to create bulb outs at the end of the blocks, making the pedestrian experience and safety greater for this area than what exists now, and with some generous opportunities for a handsome streetscape. All of which, by the way, is consistent with the desire of the developer and consistent with the desire of the city. The third priority is for in the event there are savings from that $450,000, the city then has the third priority to use whatever savings there might be. If we can accomplish our plans for less, we get to use that in the right-of-way. It might be in the alley, it might be 11th Street, it might be 12th Street, but we would have whatever the savings are from those $450,000. The fourth priority is facade enhancements. There's a lot of glass. It's high-end. It's expensive. The facade enhancement is $3.2 million. And the site acquisition is at $1.2 million, essentially the price that was paid for the land in its first acquisition by a portion of the current developers. That's a quick look at this. You saw this a couple of weeks ago when it was a plan amendment time. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but it's probably pretty fresh in your memory at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Landis. Questions? Councilwoman Gaylor Baird.
I wish it were more fresh. Maybe you did speak to this before, but just a quick question about the 40-inch or a little over 3-foot easement that's permanent into the right-of-way. Could you explain how that works and how that fits in with maybe the pedestrian enhancements that you were showing us? Is that it's Q Street right-of-way?
Is this the foundations that we're talking about? I'm mystified by the question. I wish I could have an answer.
Not the foundations.
Hallie's got some. Oh, good. All right.
So I believe you said the 40-inch easement.
Hallie Salem.
Hallie Salem Urban Development Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the 40-inch easement is for footings, foundations related to the building. Our garage actually encroaches into, our footings encroach into private property. So we have sort of a dual easement to satisfy both our encroachment into the private property and their encroachment into the right-of-way.
Could you just show visually what that means? Thank you.
It's that 40-inch easement around the front of that building into Q Street.
That has nothing to do with the lane of traffic that you were talking about.
Oh,
It's
no.
that small. Okay, thank you.
And by the way, this is where the foundation, at about 8 feet below the surface, projects into land that we own. It's because the foundation, to operate as efficiently as possible, sort of spreads out. And in some places, we've allowed that to happen. In others, they've changed the kinds of foundations they use, but that's the case in this situation. The intrusion or incursion into our area occurs below ground by about 8 feet. Any other questions?
Other questions from the council?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Landis. Would anyone else like to speak on this agenda item?
I would.
Here's.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, my name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900 here in Lincoln. Although that's not accurate right now because I'm in temporary space that I don't even know the address. I'm out at 56 and O Street.
Why?
So I'll update you on what my address is because I really don't know. But I'm here today on behalf of Lead Place, and with me is Tam Allen, one of the principals of Lead Place. 3 weeks ago, we did have the plan amendment in front of you, and today we're in front of you for both the redevelopment agreement and the bond ordinance. The redevelopment agreement has been accurately described by Director Landis. The total project cost, we anticipate about approximately $31 million for this facility. About $5 million has been designated for the tax increment financing component for those eligible uses described by Director Landis. I think it's important to know, I really like this picture.
Whoa.
That's a little inception-y.
Well, but it does two things. We call this the Spider-Man view, but this is the view of the building down to the enhanced landscaping and streetscaping area. The elimination of the south through lane in Q Street really allows us to enhance the streetscape as a part of this project to the benefit of not only the garage, but also certainly for this facility and for the university's museum on the east end of this block. The redevelopment agreement itself does provide for the 100 parking stalls. We think we have a good plan worked out for that. The 60 stalls for residential use will be located up on the 5th floor at current city market rates. There's no price break for that, and those individual users will be contracting directly with the city. Those stalls will be reserved. The 40 commercial stalls will not be reserved and will be anywhere within the parking garage. The exhibits that are attached to the agreement got a little more complicated.
Hallie Saliam did describe, we have a mutual footings easement, because one of the challenges of dealing with the downtown design standards, which requires buildings to be built to the property line, is what you do with the footings that are required for these kinds of towers. And consequently, we have to have some flexibility to help each other, and we do need these subgrade easements to be able to deal with the footings. Obviously, the challenge is you don't want it to interfere with the city's use of the right-of-way for future utility purposes. We take that into account in the design, and that's why at an 8-foot depth, it should not have any interference with the city's usage of that right-of-way. We also have a streetscape easement by which the redeveloper will really assume long-term maintenance for all the streetscape and all the improvements within this project area, and I think that's to the benefit of the city. In addition, we dealt with the tower crane. Obviously, with a 20-story tower, this is going to take a lot of construction effort, and the tower crane is going to be located in that right-of-way at Q Street, and we do have that dealt with within the easement documents. The other thing I wanted to mention is that just last December, this body did adopt the 2018 Downtown Master Plan. This project does hit on a couple of the components of that Downtown Master Plan. Obviously, it provides an additional approximately 40 housing units in downtown Lincoln. Certainly, that's one of the emphases of the Downtown Master Plan, to include all types of housing opportunities in the downtown area. But also, this does provide the entryway for the city to come up with a common theme for design of the Q Street right-of-way, and I think this is a good advancement of that effort. Other than that, the construction schedule would be, assuming this body elects to move us forward, we'd anticipate construction be starting this spring, and construction would be concluded in summer of 2020 approximately. There's a lot of interest in this kind of project, because when you think about the housing that has been built in downtown, it hasn't been home ownership opportunities, and this facility will provide that. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the council have questions for this testifier? I see
you.
no hands go up. Thank you, Mr. Houston. Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak on this agenda item?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Tam Allen. I'm a principal and I'm the developer. Part of the ownership group is for this project. I'm happy to bring this project to you today. It's been a long, long journey, and I would be remiss if I would not give credit to your very, very hardworking staff at Urban Design with the city. I mean, we've had weekly meetings on this every single week since August. I give them a lot of credit. I'm not saying they're easy, but hopefully that we have covered the issues that would be of concern to your body and also of the city, and to have a great project at this place in the city. So I would, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the project.
Questions from the council? Mr. Allen, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak? And welcome back, Mr. Ogden.
I'm back. Todd Ogden, downtown Lincoln, 206 South 13th Street, Suite 101.
He has his address down.
Yes. I'll sign it after this. But yes, we are also here with the Downtown Lincoln Association to support the Lead Place development. Extremely excited about this opportunity. Hate to be a broken record, but this won't be the last time. The Downtown Master Plan was adopted recently, and Section 4.1.4 of the Neighborhood Opportunity calls for supporting the creation of housing at higher densities in downtown, and including housing as a key component of mixed-use developments. The key word there is density. I think, really, I don't have a lot to say, but for the most part, when we see how dense of property this is, some people find it hard to believe that you're going to fit that much into that little notches in that development. So it's very exciting for us to see that kind of dense development, and that kind of mixed housing is exactly what we need downtown. We want a variety of housing types, and this certainly fits one of those types, and we want to continue to encourage more developers like the one that come for you today to continue to do that, and we're really excited to have this developer in and continue to add more and more living opportunities for downtown Lincoln.
Council have questions for this testifier? Mr. Ogden, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak on this agenda item?
My name is Empress Road. Overall, I'm in favor of this project, but there are a couple points that I'm against. One, the 60 stalls, again, you're charging market rate. So that means the people in that residence going to park their Mercedes and Lexus next to, well, same floor as somebody driving their 20-year-old Chevy down there. I don't think you should pay they should pay more than market rate. It's a premium. You're doing the developer a favor. He doesn't have to build a garage. The garage is built. You're giving him, selling him 60 spaces, and I think we should charge a premium for that. Again, you're giving up, well, our public's right to park there, and again, for, well, what they say, market rate, which is really pretty cheap. I checked it. It's pretty reasonable. So again, I think when you do this, there should be a premium. If the people live there, don't want to pay it, well, they can, find another parking garage. And next part is the TIF. TIF is supposed to be granted, but if. In other words, if the TIF is not granted, the project won't go forward. Well, the developers already said they already sold 40% of the condos already. So if TIF isn't granted, I doubt if they're going to back out of this deal. So I don't think that standard has been met. The second one is the area has to be blighted. Well, it appears it's blighted because, well, we say it's blighted. I mean, because there are some, the Nebraska law lays out some standards for what they consider blighted. Includes a substantial number of deteriorated or deteriorating structures. Oh, the MV suite's fallen down. Is a manse deteriorating? Is Lee Theater deteriorating? Has insanitary or unsafe conditions? Experiencing deterioration of site or improvements? I don't think the parking garage is breaking down any. I think that's pretty well maintained. Is detrimental to public health and safety, morals, or welfare in its present condition and use. Again, the population of the city, the per capita income is lower than the average per capita income of the city. And again, I think those people who live in the manse probably make more than the average salary, and that's the only residential area around there. Or the population is stable or decreasing population. Well, actually, population has been going up in the area. We have more housing units coming in. Again, like I say at the old post office in the manse. So that condition is not right. And again, they say these features should be reasonably distributed throughout the area. So basically, you can't have a good area found blighted just because it's close to a blighted area. It has to be within that area. I guess in closing, I don't see much chance of my testimony throwing out the TIF. I think the only way to put a check on the TIF is for somebody to file a court case and have the principals go to a court and prove that they meet these conditions for a blighted area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howison.
Hi, good evening. I'm Patrick Conway, 1545 Garrett Lane, number 101. I had not planned on speaking about this until I read it, and hearing Mr. Halverson talk about what the laws are in regard to blight, in regard to what's going on there, it seems to me that if you were to look at the $5 million in TIF funds and just look at it based on the population of the people here in the city of Lincoln, from what I've seen, most population estimates are right around 285 million. And if we just look at the people of the city of Lincoln, that would be asking each and every one of them for $17. $5 million divided by 285,000 is just over $17. Not a whole lot of money to people who can afford it, to those who can't, to those who are looking for affordable housing, to those who are making ends meet barely, to those who have seen their costs increase way faster than their pay has increased. Asking an extra $17 per person is a lot. Now, I get it that a lot of that TIF funding is going to be paid for with businesses and their taxes, which, of course, as we all know, businesses never pay taxes. They just pass it on to their consumers. And if you don't believe that, maybe a business class might be good for you. So I really don't think that TIF financing is really necessary for this. If these gentlemen are successful businessmen, which they portray themselves to be, and if this is a property that's already 30 to 40% sold, which an article in October of last year in the Journal-Star reported, then I don't see why they need to have an extra $5 million of taxpayer money to build something that they're going to build anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing no, pardon? Yes, okay. Councilman Eskridge reminds me that the primary testifiers have an opportunity for rebuttal.
We have staff questions first.
Let's do that first. That sounds like a better idea. Councilman Camp would like to have some staff questions answered, and then we'll come back to rebuttal. Who would you like to speak with?
I have either Mr. Landis or our parking garage czar back there, Wayne. My question is this: one of the testifiers asked about the, we're talking about 60 reserved 24-hour spots, and so that's a little different than rotating parking. That's Mr. Mixdorf, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Wayne Mixdorf, parking manager for the city.
Parking czar may have been a little overreaching, but he's a good czar. Benevolent czar. But anyway, I think as Mr. Mixdorf.
I think of it as a benevolent despot myself. That's just my characterization.
Okay.
A little Mussolini there.
Huh? When we talk about market rate for these, and I think everyone knows that when you assign specifically spaces, as we've done elsewhere, and we kind of learn from the lesson that reduces the actual parking supply, because when you have more, you're able to have a multiplier effect where you may be able to book 25% over the number of spaces. Here, if you take 60 out, and we've done that for other places, then that changes the dynamics. So I think, as the testifier was saying, perhaps there should be a premium here, or can you just tell us what the parking rate would be?
There is
currently?
a premium.
Okay.
We are charging what is currently our reserved rate, which generally averages between $85 and $100 throughout the downtown area. In this particular garage, it's $85. The idea that there should be another tier of reserved parking is one that we've explored, but it's not one that we've really found a justification for yet. $85 covers the amount of money that we need to achieve on a monthly basis from these particular spaces in order to meet our obligations for this garage. Should there be a time in the future when we need to have a different rate, paying more of a premium, we certainly would look to do that. But right now, I just don't think it's necessary.
What is the current monthly rate in the Q place?
Unreserved is $70, reserved is $85.
So who currently has reserved parking there?
The only reserved parking right now is the Embassy Suites. In the future, there will be 30 reserved valet parking spaces for the Kindler Hotel. And then, of course, with this completion of this development, there would be the 60 reserved spaces for the lead place.
The piece to pull out of that is there is a premium for this kind of parking. It's not the normal employer use, which is go in and find a spot. They pay $70. In this case, the price is higher. So there is a premium attached. You may want us to have an increase in that premium. There may be some desire to have it higher than that, but we do distinguish between this situation and the fishing license of going in and finding a stall. And we charge for that. So that exists here. So when we say market rate, we're comparing to other reserve stalls, and then there's a stall rate for people who are not reserved, and that's a market rate as well.
Okay, and so the documents do define that market rate specific for reserve. Okay, I'm just asking questions for definition.
Also, there is one small missing piece that I need to add. This does not include special event parking such as football. Downtown residents do pay a premium for football parking, but that would be in addition to whatever they're paying on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I appreciate that. In your testimony a moment ago, Mr. Mixdorf, You said something about another tier, and I didn't quite track with you what you're referring to.
Right now, we have two tiers of parking rates. We have our unreserved and our reserved parking. If at some point in the future it's recognized that there's a third rate that we would need to charge for a higher level of reservation. For example, we don't sign, with the exception of valet parking, and with the exception of one pre-existing agreement at University Towers, we don't specify a particular residential unit is assigned a particular space. We have just a range of reserved spaces available to anyone that would be part of that residential project. So it's just a general reserved, if you will. If we were to get into a more specific reserve situation, we might create that third level of parking rate. But right now, we're trying to stay away from that.
So these would just say lead place parking?
Yes, it wouldn't specify a specific unit.
And these aren't screened off like we've done in some other spots?
No, they're not.
And they're on the 5th level, I think Mr. Landis said. Is that a covered level, or is that the top of the building?
No, it is a covered level. This is 8 stories. So it is a covered level, but it is the level on which there will be a access door into the units.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Gaylor Baird.
Mr. Mixdorf, is there a hard stop at which you no longer allow reserved parking in our public parking garages? I think that may get at some of the questions that are here. We've seen maps about quadrants and trying to ensure public parking in different areas of the city. How do you balance the need for permanent spots for people who live right next to the parking garages versus people who are coming downtown to use garages?
Well, right now we're all right, I'm not going to make a joke. I'm going to say that we're doing it. I'm going to say we're going to do it badly, but what we do is review our numbers on a monthly basis and try to balance the number of monthly parkers that we're allowing versus the number of transient parkers. Within the context of reserved parking, those are only by redevelopment agreement. So we're not reserving any parking for customers that have not approached us for a new development project or redevelopment of one of our existing buildings. The JPA garages, which are a separate animal, and that entire project was built from the ground up, they do have a different situation. They do have gated spaces for reserved, for some of their reserved parking, but that was a completely different situation.
We are, as a parking system, cursed with our success in this sense. Employment in downtown Lincoln has gone up. And to make that employment work, and those buildings work, and those businesses work, we need to provide parking. If we had our preference, we would have more stalls in the transient user style than others for exactly the reason that John pointed out, and that is multiple sales throughout the day of people to come use it and add up a total. A transient stall likely makes more money for the system than a stall for an employee who gets the fishing license and finds the open stall. They use it from 8 to 5 for one price for $70 a month, and that's what they get. And when you compare the two, transients a little bit more attractive as far as a return. It also makes it available for the retail user because they can park 1 hour free, shopper zone close to the beginning. We put those down at the first level, so the very first stalls are things that you can get into, park, walk to a business, and come back. We like them. We'd like to have more. We've had an expanding employment base downtown, and we've been meeting that employment base. And we're now at a place, particularly in this quadrant, where we need, well, I'm sorry, in downtown, where we need to expand those resources.
What else?
Oh, yeah. I had a follow-up, Mr. Mixdorf. You mentioned the rate of 85 currently doesn't include the football games, which is very understandable. For a lead event, don't you charge a blanket amount so people just go in and that way they can leave expeditiously and not clog up?
That's correct. We use event parking, pre-collection is what you would be referring to. So we're collecting the parking fee on the entrance so that we can simply raise the gates on exit and people will be able to exit in expedited fashion. Yes, we do charge for the lead events.
How much do you charge?
$5 is our standard fee for
How many
lead events.
are there a month, for example?
The lead event schedule varies. I believe there's somewhere on the order of 25 events throughout their season, but that would be totally dependent, change from year to year.
So you have 8 to 10, so you'd be getting another $50, let's say, on event parking.
We don't fill the garage for lead events, so I don't think that. Well, remember we do have 3 garages that are located closely to lead, as well as they offer valet parking, for which we hood parking meters on our street. So we don't fill any one of those 3 garages for lead center special events. We usually get about 500 parkers in Q Place for a lead center event.
It's not uncommon for the Larson Building garage in the evening hours to have available spaces, even though it's a block and a half away, further away. There's a very heavy utilage at this garage, but there's a garage down the road on those very same nights that have a number of open stalls. It's the kind of thing where if we can, we guide people as best we can and say, you can go to this location and share that. When you have the system, you can help move people from one location to another for maximum efficiency.
One follow-up. We've started talking about building a housing downtown, and we've moved back to parking again. But I've got one. You talked about football parking. So that person who rents that space for $85 for the month.
Correct.
Has to vacate for a football game or pay you an additional cost. Am I reading that wrong?
That's correct.
And you also said the unit has 809 stalls?
Total.
And we're talking about reserving 60 for the new building, 38 for the kinder, and then 40 for businesses.
It would be 40 for the general unreserved for the retail in this building, or I should say the office in this building, that's correct. So 60 for the residences. Kindler will have, I'm not sure exactly what the number is, Hallie, 40?
I think it might be 43.
43? But 30 of them will be reserved for valet parking.
So still about another 600 left over.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Are there other questions from the council? Gentlemen, thank you for coming forward. Would anyone else in the audience? I think we're in rebuttal now, right? No, we're do questions first. Those were do you have other staff questions? And now rebuttal. Mr. Houston, Mr. Landis, Mr. Anybody, Miss Anybody? All right, so I think we're done with this one. Let's move to our next agenda item.
We can move on to item 6E then, amending Chapter 3.16 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the collection of sales and use tax to add a provision setting forth a process for notifying retailers not less than 30 days and not more than 45 days in advance of any increase to, reduction of, or termination of the city-imposed sales and use tax rate.
Chris Connolly, Acting City Attorney. I'm just going to introduce this a little bit. Councilwoman Lamb asked me to draft this ordinance, and that would provide an opportunity to give notice to retailers when the sales tax is increased or decreased. Ms. Lamb?
Thank you. So when we ended the last sales tax, which there wasn't notice that went out locally, and basically the retailers would have had to go online unless they were part of a subscription push system through the state. So what this does is it allows the it requires that the city send out notice 30 to 45 days before any change, either upward or downward, to those businesses. The businesses, or the city, is able to receive on CD the list of businesses as long as it's requested by June 30th of each year. And then they could send out either letters, or under this, they could send out either letters or postcards. And at Councilwoman Raybold's question, Brandon Kaufman looked into the prices of those, the costs of those, and basically we're looking at about $12,000 if it's a letter, and probably half of that if it's a postcard. And I don't know if he is here tonight. Did Brandon?
Oh, but Sherry is here.
Sherry's here, that's right. He did tell me that way. Thank you. And I just want to confirm the numbers that would go out and the amounts we're talking about.
Sherry Wolf, Durable Finance Department. Yes, your numbers were right on until yesterday or today when postage went up 5 cents for first class postage. So we're estimating, based on the numbers we got from the Department of Revenue that there are about 17,000 addresses on that list. And so with the 5% increase in postage, we might be up to about 13,000 for first-class letters, but there was no increase in the postcard rate.
Right. And then the postcards, too, are smaller, so they're not as expensive to print and so forth. Right. One of the things we had talked about was, as part of the original that I proposed, I had in there, or email if available, and in visiting with some council members and with the law department, the chances of perhaps emails changing and so forth is might be problematic. So we reduced that. We just took that out altogether and left it at U.S. mail, but made sure that it was open to either postcards or letters, depending on what staff wanted. Additionally, I have talked with the law department, and when this comes up for a vote next week, I'll be asking for an amendment that makes it very clear that this was never intended to invalidate any tax if notice wasn't sent out. So we'll make that, that's my proposal also. And I think with that, I'm...
Councilwoman Raybould, do you have a question for this testifier?
Well, I don't know if it's for Sherry or Cindy, but
just throw it out there.
That $13,000, does that include the printing cost and the mailing cost, or just the mailing cost?
Per the online calculator, we have not done a ton of research into this, but Brandon went out and just found kind of an online direct mail company, and that was what their calculator estimated. So that should include the printing.
And so I guess since this is something that is relatively rare, that it's only happened, I guess, probably once, that I can recall in the last, 4 or 5 years? So.
Last year. Get ready to look at it
Question
again.
to Cindy, how else does the state notify then?
The state puts it on the website. Just the state, of course, manages the sales tax for all jurisdictions across the state. So it posts it on a website, and retailers have to go to that website in order to check for any tax changes, except unless they're part of a subscriber push email list, which means they have to keep things up to date. Tax Commissioner provides an up-to-date list to cities by request by June 30th each year. And then just to make it clear, to clarify, if there's a sales tax that begins or ends, there's only a certain time of year that it can do that, correct?
It will depend on when it gets approved, but basically we have to have it approved and to the state at least 90 days before the tax would start.
Okay, and then, so that gives us plenty of time to send out notice in the 30 to 45 day window.
Correct.
And then also in this the quarter-cent sales tax that ended, there was some, because there's only a certain date that you could stop the tax, then we did end up with an overage than what was anticipated from the tax, correct?
We did not. The state of Nebraska may have collected some additional revenue, but because our rate had at that point in time been reduced by a quarter cent, that was not passed on to the city.
Right, and so I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I wasn't talking about the tax that was collected, additional tax was collected in that 10 days. What I was saying that our tax, the quarter-cent sales tax itself, by the time it ended, collected a couple $1 million more than we had anticipated.
I think that's right, wasn't it?
I guess I can't verify those figures. The quarter-cent sales tax was about just over $1 million a month.
Right.
So...
I think that we have in front of us maybe $2 million or something that's going to come up to allocate for something over what we spent. Okay, so I guess my point is that spending $12,000 or $13,000 to let retailers know not to be charging anymore, or that they need to increase, a small price to pay compared to that. So, thank you.
Councilman Camp?
Yeah, I know I have to pay sales tax for my lofts or lodging and or lodging tax and sales tax. And when I get it's either a 10 or 64 form for sales tax, the state will include information there on the community changes in their rates. Now, I don't know the timing and so forth. And it might be that because sales tax and payments can be all electronic, I think I'm still getting them, or they may just cease doing that. So your legislation has a lot of merit.
Councilwoman Gaylor Baird.
I think, just maybe you could clarify for us, I think what Councilwoman Lamb said about this preventing the extra 10 days of collection beyond the date of the termination of the sales tax could be prevented by this process. But the collection of the collection by the state ends at a time that's not determined by us. So we make a conservative budget of the sales tax, budgeted expenses of the sales tax revenue, because we don't know how much we'll get by the time that they end the sales tax. So what I'm saying is, I don't think this changes their timeline. They'll still collect through October if this was implemented along the same timelines we started it. But if in fact retailers in Lincoln did not know to stop in October, this would allow them to have a notification. But it wouldn't eliminate the collection of an extra $2 million.
No. This is only for when it's charged beyond the time that it should have stopped.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Which I think that when we did the calculations, we looked at how much is a third of what's the million collected a month or so forth, and then looking at just the extra quarter cent, how much that would be, and it came to probably between $25,000 and $35,000 that probably was collected, and there's no way to tell for sure. Larger purchases obviously have more sales tax attached. Unfortunately for the folks that are paying the tax, unless it amounts to a certain amount of money, they can't make a claim with the state, and they'll never see that money again. So that's somewhat problematic. But.
Does anyone else have a question before I have a question? Councilman Eskridge.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to see the email notification option left in there. And I say this from the standpoint of working in state government and realizing what's happening now, where mail from the Department of Revenue or Department of Labor, wherever, goes from Lincoln to Omaha, back to Lincoln, takes a week, 10 days sometimes for that mail to make it. And the state typically is requiring more and more people and businesses to make applications for licenses or whatever else it is via electronically. Seems reasonable that we should be able to do that electronically and save the $13,000, and there'll be another stamp increase in another year or two, and after that, and I don't know. I'm wondering if the Postal Service may be the Pony Express of the future, and if we should keep that option of by email or electronic transfer or something an option for us, just practically.
I want to weigh in on that after Councilman Christensen speaks.
Just so people know, if we send a postcard, it's not first-class mail. So maybe something that would make it clear that you could send a postcard or an email, with an email being the preferred method. But if you send something by postcard, which is reasonable, it costs less money to both print and to mail, and it is not first-class mail.
Councilman, there might be some different types of postage. I wondered about that as well. So I did call the post office this week, and they told me there was a 35-cent first-class postcard.
Okay.
Wearing my other hat for a second, part of my job duties at the Department of Labor is to send a quarterly email blast out to employers. So we have a little over 60,000 active employers in the state, and those who file their quarterly reports electronically, we send them an email blast out reminding them to file next quarter. So and then those who don't file electronically, we send them a paper document, similar to what Councilwoman Lamb's suggesting. I have a question. I'm assured that someone will check that the lists we get from revenue are people who are not receiving the email push, but just those who didn't get notified electronically. And I'm sure that someone will follow through on that one.
The list that we'll get from the Department of Revenue is a list of everyone who has paid City of Lincoln sales tax in whatever period we specify. It could be a quarter, it could be a year. So those will be people outside of our community, anybody who's paid tax to us.
Yeah. Councilwoman said that the Department of Revenue does a push email if people subscribe to it.
Yes, if businesses subscribe to it. And again, we're talking about every business that actually collects taxes for the city within the city limits.
And that list you're getting will include those people who subscribed and those who didn't.
But I don't think the list has the ability to make a distinction about who's on email lists. I did ask today, and we won't get any email lists or any email addresses with this list.
I understand. Thank you. Other questions from the council for these two testifiers? See no one here. We're still in public hearing. Is anyone in the audience that'd like to speak to this agenda item? Thank you both, Ms. Wolf and Mr. Connolly. Hey.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Dustin Antonello. My address is 620 North 48th Street, Suite 205 here in Lincoln, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Lincoln Independent Business Association. So LIBA supports the ordinance to require the city to notify local businesses when changes are made to the sales and use tax. When the 911 sales tax expired at the end of September 2008, LIBA notified our members that the sales tax was about to be reduced. We received several questions from members who were either unaware of the tax decrease or were confused about what rate they should charge after the sales tax expired. As a result, we were not surprised to hear that many local businesses were still collecting the quarter-cent sales tax after it expired. Although organizations like LIBA play an important role in getting the word out to local businesses, when sales taxes change, our reach is limited. For this reason, we support requiring the city finance director to notify businesses in Lincoln of pending sales tax increases or decreases. We believe this new reporting mechanism will be especially useful if the voters decide in April to increase the sales tax for street improvements. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Antonello. Questions from the council? Quickly, do you said you as LIBA do have some ability to notify businesses?
That's correct. So we have just under 1,400 members, so we sent out an email about 3 months in advance letting them know that the sales tax was about to expire and to charge the rate that they were charging before the 911 sales tax was implemented.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? Thank you again, Mr. Antonello. Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, I think that ends our public hearing session.
Yes, it does. That would conclude public hearings, so we can move into the voting session. First item is item 7A, change of zone 18030, application of Robert Grimmett for a change from AG to AGR agricultural residential on property generally located at 6705 West Van Dorn Street. This was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Raybold, second by Councilwoman Raybold, Councilman Christensen. Discussion.
Could we just get a clarification of yes versus no vote on this, given the recommendation of denial?
Yes.
Yes, approves the change of zone, no denies the change of zone.
Okay.
And I have a staff question, too, if Mr. Carey would yield for question.
David Carey with the Planning Department.
Thank you, Mr. Carey, for coming forward. I remember, and it's been a couple weeks since I read this, but this change would make more acreages available for development. This would redivide this. And I think somewhere in the notes it said that the number of acreage lots that are currently available in the city. Do you remember that number? Or
Well,
Is there a great need for more acreage lots to develop?
We provided some different numbers for the county as a whole, and then we did a more or less a smaller sub-area analysis of this particular area along Van Dorn, or up north and south of Van Dorn. So the finding of that information is that we do have both currently in existence as far as being platted and vacant, as well as what the plan calls for these types of acreages, which is the yellow color in our land use plan for the 2040 plan. We have the equivalent of about 60 years worth of lots or land, raw land, that's been identified for this type of use based on the actual demand that we see, which is somewhere in the range of 90 to 100 per year.
60 years?
And just to be clear about that, that includes the jurisdictions of the small towns and villages throughout the county. A lot of those towns and villages have that land use and that size of lot in their jurisdictions.
Thank you. Councilman Eskridge?
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
I also have some questions. This is a hard one for me. You know, representing West Lincoln, and we've got a lot of important infrastructure in West Lincoln that, you know, makes easy access to the city, and sorry, John, but to develop that way a little bit helps to relieve some of the pressure on infrastructure in South and Southeast Lincoln. So I'm really, I mean, it makes some sense for me to see growth in this area, and I'm thinking about people that own land and being able to do, you know, what they want to with the land, balanced with, you know, what's good policy in terms of annexation and development, and when the city grows out farther, than not creating problems with that. What I'm wondering about is, I'm always looking for options. What's another option? Yes, instead of yes or no, is there some middle ground?
Well, we, as part of the staff report and as part of our explanation of our recommendation for denial, there is an existing option, and is called the AGCUP, an Ag Community Unit Plan. So what that option is, and it is available to this property at this time and any other properties that are in similar situations, that what that does is it sets aside the majority of the land for that future development that we want to preserve for more growth in the future, based on our build out of our comprehensive plan and the growth plan that's in that plan, and wanting to be pro-growth in the sense of reserving land for more density and more growth in the future. What that option does, the Ag CUP, it does allow for, in this case, approximately about 12 lots could be built, could be platted and then built now. And the remainder of the land would be set aside for that future development. And that is an option that's available. It's the way we've set up our ordinance as well as our plan, so that we can do a little bit of today while reserving for more growth in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Raybold?
So David, was this option presented to the family? Have they considered it, or?
Yeah, I know that it was part of the conversation as this came forward. It's been explained that way. So that it certainly is a current option. There's no doubt about that.
So if we vote to deny the request, just to change it as is listed to AGR, they still have that option to
yes,
put
they
forward?
Do. Yes.
Okay.
Councilman Christensen?
So this option you're talking about, though, would reserve a part of that property that they could not sell for development at this time, correct?
Correct. It would be set up that way.
So we would be denying them the use of that land.
Well, to be clear about what that would mean is that they would be setting it aside, so any current uses, if there's farming operations going on, certainly that could still happen. That is usually what happens in these types of situations.
But we would be denying them the use that they want to put the land to.
It would be denying what they have applied for, correct?
Other questions from the council? Councilman Camp?
Mr. Carey, you were mentioning as far as future acreage lots, you included the villages and so forth, which are generally going to be farther away than this particular area in West Van Dorn. And I'm not sure that that's, I don't know how much of that 60-year supply you said, if you're looking at 90 or 100 a year, say 100 a year for simplicity, so that'd be 6,000 supposedly you identified. But how many of those would be in villages and farther away versus really in the Lincoln proximity?
I believe the numbers were about split half and half. So about half of that supply is in the about outside of the city limits and in the county jurisdiction, and the other is in those jurisdictions, the roughly 1 mile jurisdictions of those towns and villages.
So some of those lots then though could be in South Lancaster County.
Sure.
That's not in a village.
Sure, absolutely.
So saying half of those, or say in a perimeter around Lincoln, would not be correct.
That number,
Accurate.
that number is representative of the county.
Right.
Yes.
And so I'm saying, so okay, so that broadens it, so that diminishes or decreases the number that would be available around Lincoln. As far as potential inventory for a.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but when we look at the demand, we talk about 90 to 100 units per year countywide.
Right.
So that's a county demand, not a city of Lincoln demand for those types of units and those types of lots. So when we want to do apples to apples, so we look at the entire county's opportunity as what both existing as far as platted lots as well as land that is identified for those lots in the future.
Okay, if you look at the countywide for the actual development, how many of those would be beyond a couple miles of Lincoln? Look in the whole county.
Well, certainly I can't come up with the number off the top of my head how many of those that make up that 60-year stock that we have identified in the plan, but it's there are some certainly that are closer in. For example, recently we have changed our plan to identify some of that area between the Lincoln 3-mile jurisdiction going south to Hickman. There's been quite a bit of demand down there. We did change our land use there, but it was outside of our growth plan, outside of the city's 3-mile jurisdiction, and there was a higher level of demand there. But your question about how many are within a few miles of the city, I don't have that number off the top of my head. There is quite a bit of it, though. I mean, there is a significant amount of that within the area that you're thinking of. And getting back to the area of this particular proposal, I believe, I could look up the number if I get a moment here, but I believe it was several hundred just in the area of this proposal that the plan allows for already, as well as there are vacant existing lots available in this area for this type of a unit.
If someone's going to, you've got a plot of land, if you'd allow just 12 acreages but not the rest of it would stay in farming or I guess high density residential if it were changed there, and say somebody wants to go, the owners here want to go and develop the acreages, it's kind of hard if you get the ball rolling and to spread your cost over 12 versus however many the area would handle. There's a difference there. There's an overhead cost to actually get in and do just 12. And so I guess
I think we certainly would work with them if they wanted to go in that direction. Certainly we could help out with how the lot layout may be beneficial in certain areas of the land versus others to limit those costs. That's part of what we do with these types of proposals when they come forward. I think there are there's a balancing of costs when you start to develop that many more lots. There are costs to that as well at a lower density. So it would balance out, and to some extent, we certainly would work with them if that was something they were interested in.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess I'm ultimately, though, the marketplace is what creates the demand, and that's one of the difficult things with zoning. We're kind of dictating the use of land, and that's an important part of our work here behind the dais. But, thank you.
Councilwoman Raybould.
David, for clarification, the two parcels that are to the west of this proposed area, it's a mix, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some acreages and then smaller lots further to the west. Is that correct?
I bet that's true.
Okay.
Councilwoman Gaylor Baird.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jane, because I think that's why this is particularly hard in the short term to make this decision. We've seen the consequences of short-term planning. We've had to deal with them as a council. Short-term planning decisions that were made decades ago with the recent annexation package. When we don't have a build-through design and the city grows to those acreages, we have all kinds of problems. And the fact that there are, acreages to the west is also a problem because it creates an expectation that you ought to be able to do it, even if it means repeating a bad decision. And I don't think we should repeat a bad decision. And as John said, the zoning is it's powerful. It's there are no guarantees that you can get a change of zone. So the expectation is that it stays in the current kind of zoning. This PUD option is a compromise. It does allow for some acreage development, but in the short term, but it allows for the long term smoother assimilation between urban and rural. And we have to be thinking about the long term so we don't run into conflicts in the future that are very upsetting for residents who expect a certain lifestyle that is not going to be possible as the city grows to them.
So David, back to you. If we do deny this, the family would have an option to do the CUP.
Correct.
And where they could do up to 12, or they could develop the rest of it for higher density development as an option as well, correct?
I don't think so. So I think what would have to happen is they would need the urban infrastructure to be there and available, and it's not at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where our position on this is that's why we would like to set aside the remainder of the acres and wait for that infrastructure to come. There is a long-term plan for mainly our sewer plan to get out there along the Haynes branch. There is not a current decision to fund that project, which is why this area is considered longer term in the future for the urbanization. So higher level density beyond what could be done in AG or AGR is not really possible there right now. But the whole idea is that we would set aside the remainder so that could happen in the future with that higher density, with quite a significantly more units than what's being discussed.
So basically what I'm hearing is that the city does not want the owners of this property to get the maximum value out of their property if they sell it. That's what I'm hearing you tell me.
Actually, no, because there's no maximum value guaranteed when you're in an AGR zone. AG zoning. They cannot expect that value without the approval of a change of zone.
Right. And if they get that change of zone, they can get a significantly higher value than if they get this agriculture CUP thing. Because they would be able to sell more of the land at a better price.
So our position from the perspective of the staff, and my perspective, is that there's a balance here between that short-term overall value that requires a change of zone, that isn't a right yet. It could be if there's a decision made by your body, but there isn't yet today. And we are suggesting that there is a better longer-term strategy for the land based on our existing plan that's in place that is supported by the position.
But not for the current owners. Your long-term plan of a greater good does not include the greater good for the current owners of the land. And that's where I have my problem with this. You're dictating to people, who could, if we allow them to, which I find an arrogant position to be in, if we allow them to sell their property at the maximum value they can get what the market will bear, then we're somehow putting the city at disadvantage. But it's significantly distant in the future, and I think these people have a right to be able to determine the use of their property as long as it's not harming other people.
I would only say, understanding your position, I would only say that our plan is consistent in the way it's set up, that we have these different areas for longer term growth, and we attempt to apply it consistently for these different situations. So that is where our position is coming from, and that is why we're suggesting this interim position so that they have some current use of the land and holding back on the rest of it so that the long-term growth of the city can be accommodated better.
I'm going to go with Councilwoman Raybold first, and Councilwoman Gaylord-Baird.
So following up on Councilman Christensen's thought, I thought we just discussed that the market does determine whether, say we grant them this approval to go to AGR, and they want to do multiple acreages. But I thought we also had discussed that the two parcels further to the left have a number of those lots that are not sold or not being developed for acreage use, which goes back to the oversupply currently for the current market demand. So say we gave them the authority, but they may not be able to sell those.
Well, I mean, I
plan.
think that's part of our position here is that there is not the amount of demand that countywide is less than 100 of these lots per year. And with the amount that is already platted and already identified throughout the county for this type of use, it would be, the demand is not there for quick turnaround. I could be confident in saying that. So that is part of the explanation here as well, is that the demand is not so high throughout the county for this type of lot, that more of this use needs to be created. That is definitely what we're saying.
Councilwoman Gaylor-Baird?
I've just add to this discussion that there is not only a long-term view, but a larger principle involved in that were this to be approved, there are places all throughout this particular tier where other people could come forward and say, if you can do it there, we should be able to do it here. And pretty soon you've got a much more complicated, you blow up your strategy for growing the urban center outward, because you're going to have conflict after conflict between acreages and urban. And that's precisely what we're trying to avoid by making difficult decisions today that are appropriate and strategic for tomorrow for the entire community.
Councilman Camp?
Yeah. Well, I think from the testimony we had last meeting in the public hearing, it was also brought to point that in, say, a 3-acre area, you're restricted on where you can put the residents. So it would facilitate later development as the city would grow that way, so that could be subdivided into smaller lots. So I think there's a path here to achieve both what the city would want is to create density when it got there, but in the interim, to provide for the acreage growth.
Yeah, Councilman Camp, you're correct that that's what part of the testimony was when we talked about this during the hearing. I would add to that, though, that the experience today and recently in some of the areas that were approved like this, that were closer in, think of the south area that we currently have been talking about annexing, have annexed some of it, we'll be talking about it again, and becomes problematic, that those similar type of ghost platting that has taken place on some of those lots. The problem is that further density and development is not nearly as easy to develop unless if you set aside the land so that you have the straightforward platting of that area for urban density when it's ready for that. And we see very piecemeal pieces of that happening, certainly not in mass throughout those areas that were subdivided in what's proposed here. So my suggestion there is that while it's fact that ghost platting can be part of this and you have the potential, it doesn't happen very straightforwardly. It doesn't happen in the numbers that we would want to see, and it ends up being a barrier for the future development of the city in the future. So that is also the position that we're taking on that.
Now, when you talk about these properties and ghost planning and so forth, would some of the ones that you haven't had the good experience on perhaps have been developed or platted before this been changes in the whole AGR, which requires you put the residents in a smaller area of that whole parcel?
Well, certainly some of them are older than that. Those policies have been in place, but there's still, the physical layout is still more or less the same as what would otherwise be the case. So they certainly can further develop. They just simply are not doing that. So that's the reality that we deal with. Excuse me?
So just retaining the acreage?
Correct.
Yeah. Other questions from the council? Mr. Gary, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did we have a motion on this?
Yes, it was moved and seconded, so we're
Thank
ready
you.
to vote.
All righty. I think if no further discussion, would you call the roll, please?
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor-Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
No.
Schob?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Motion lost 3-4. Next is item 7B, Street name change 18001, renaming Cattle Drive, located in the Prairie Village North Subdivision, as Settlers Lane, and renaming Discovery Drive, located in the University of Nebraska Technology Park Subdivision in the Highlands, as Cattle Drive, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilwoman Raybold and second by Councilman Camp. Discussion.
We do have a motion to amend number 1 on this one. It was introduced by Camp last week, but we did not have a second.
Did you review the amendment?
Would you
Yes,
refresh
I
us
sure
on that
can.
then?
It is on line 2 to strike Settlers Lane and replace with Mustang Drive. And in section 1, line 8, strike Settlers Lane and replace with Mustang Drive.
I'll second that.
Motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Christensen to amend. Discussion. Would you call the roll on the motion to amend?
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now we go back to
The main
any additional
motion.
discussion on the mutual. Let me start over. Is there any additional discussion on the original motion as amended? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next is item 7C, text amendment 18014 regarding parking matrix. This was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilwoman Raybold, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion?
I think we have some, do we have a,
I think there's, yeah.
yeah, now I have 7D, but is
7D.
there?
This is 7C. We don't have a motion to amend on this
Thank
item.
you.
Okay. Any additional discussion by the council on this item? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Christensen,
No.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
No.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp.
No.
Motion carried 4-3. Next then is item 7D, text amendment 18014 regarding Title III design standards for zoning regulations. We did have a motion to amend number 1 on this item, and it was introduced by Raybold.
I thought it was motion to amend number 2.
I think this is, and that's a little confusing because I have a motion to amend number 1, but I don't have a copy of it. I have something.
I just have a motion to amend number 1.
Chris Connolly, city attorney, acting city attorney. What happened was there were a couple discussions on which alternative Councilwoman Raybold would like to use. But in the end, there was only one that we were going to do. So there's only one motion to actually
Okay.
amend.
I- So I had a motion also that I had been told before the meeting was prepared for us. And this was having to do with the text amendment. I have a summary of those, basically changing the language. Can we just check and see if you have seen this, please?
Also, Mr. Chair, I talked to
Yes.
David Carey this morning. Has he already left?
No,
He
he's
said-
still here. Mr. Carey, would
Oh, I
you?
couldn't see him there. Yeah, he told me there were just going to be a bunch of amendments coming forward. And
Correct.
so I guess one isn't a bunch, so maybe we ought to get everything on the
Yeah.
table here so we know what's happening.
I do not remember seeing this. I have not seen this document.
Sorry, I couldn't see you through Mr. Connolly.
That's okay. David Carey with the Plan Department. Just for clarification,
Rain in there?
It's eyesight.
I had not seen the actual full legal version of these, but my understanding was that there were, I think, Councilwoman Lamb, you had two pieces of an amendment.
Correct.
And then Councilwoman Raybold also had a set of amendments. That was my understanding going into today.
Correct.
Yeah, and
Have you seen that at all?
I have not seen the ones that you've offered. I saw the ones that Councilwoman Raybold offered.
I don't think I haven't seen yours either.
What's that?
I haven't seen those.
So, and we had talked about those. This is the one, and I know that you've discussed that with the, right.
I feel like we need some more time on this. We might need to.
I'm going to move that this whole thing be delayed until our next meeting, And then we'll have time to put together all the amendments as people want to do.
Thank you.
I think Councilman Camp already did second that. It was motion by Councilman Christensen, second by Councilman Camp. Do we need to put some time on this motion to delay?
Our next meeting.
To our next meeting.
Okay.
And if there are any other amendments, let's share them with each other ahead of time. Mr. Conway.
Okay. I hear no other discussion of this motion to delay. That's not really something we discuss, is it? We'll just, Teresa, you tell me when you're ready, and then
I'm ready.
Would you call the roll, please?
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Motion carried to delay action to February 4th.
Cindy's.
Carried, 7-0.
Summary.
We're there now?
For you and a summary, okay.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last meeting of the month, and traditionally on the last meeting of the month, we have an open forum for public comment from the public.
May I finish?
Pardon?
May I finish?
Oh, you should finish, yes, I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Never mind.
Okay,
Never mind.
that's okay. Our resolutions on first reading are items 8A through G. Ordinances on first reading are items 9A through E. Our pending list are items 11A through C. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at this time.
Thank you, Teresa, and I'm sorry about that. I kind of
That's okay.
get a little antsy.
That's okay.
I think it's one of each, isn't it? Or is it? Oh.
Hi, good evening once again. I've been here a few times. My family and I have been in Lincoln for 19 months. We came for a job and have come to fall in love with Nebraska and the city of Lincoln. We've had life experiences here that we never could have had anywhere else. We've decided that this is where we would like to call home. This is a place where we'd like to stay. My wife and I both have jobs we really like. We both work with people we love. We have great friends, and we've grown our family since we've been here. Our son has met and gotten married to a wonderful young woman, and they're expecting their first child. We love Lincoln. We have fallen in love with this city. We talked at length about moving out of our rental and buying a home. We love this city. We want this to be our home. But our discussions have been changing lately. Increased costs to live here through increased property taxes, whether it's through the rates that are being charged or through the arbitrary valuations that are being increased, make it more expensive to live here. Sales tax increases make it more expensive to live here and do business here. Additional restrictions and responsibilities and cost of business being put on business owners make it more expensive to live here and do business here. And now the outgoing mayor has decided he needs to form a task force to look at whether or not we need to have more regulations on how people store their own personal property. I'll tell you how it's going to happen. They're going to find out that there are some places that have more restrictions, and some of those places with more restrictions have success with it. Some of those places with more restrictions don't have success with it. Some of the places that they research are going to have fewer restrictions, and they're going to find the same things. That some of those cities have more problems because of less restrictions. Some of them don't have any problems despite having no restrictions. They're also going to find that here in Lincoln, it's not a problem. I can't tell you that I've heard that many stories on the news or seen that many stories in the Journal-Star about a kid who walks in and finds a firearm and just ends up killing himself. I'm just not seeing that many stories. Maybe they're not being published. I find that hard to believe. I think the old adage is true. If it bleeds, it leads. And that would be leading the story. So all these different things, the additional taxes, the additional cost to live here and do business here, make it a little bit harder for me to stand behind that decision to want to buy a home here. Not because I love the city any less, not because I love the people of this city any less, not because I love Nebraska any less, but because sometimes it just gets too expensive all these costs are rising a lot faster than my pay goes up. And I know I'm not the only person in this city who finds that. I know that. Now, granted, I'm a public servant. I work for the state. I serve the people of this great state. And I love doing that. I love taking care of the people of Nebraska. I can't think of another job I'd rather have right now than to care for my neighbors, to take care of them, to do what I do for the citizens and communities of this state. But you got to get out of our way. You got to get out of the way of people who want to live here, who want to do business here, who want to make this their home. You can't, if you don't have enough money to do the things you think you need to do as a city, do what I do when I don't have enough money to do the things I need to do as a father and a husband. I cut my cost, I find out where I can make it stretch, and I don't go around taking more money from people who can't afford to give it up. You sit behind that bench, supposed to be serving the people of Lincoln. You keep raising the taxes, you keep decreasing our freedoms, you're not serving the people of Lincoln. You need to get out of our way, let us run our own lives, quit taking our money, and be more responsible with what you've already taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. Mr. Weiss.
Hello, my name is Robert Way, 801 Elevado Avenue, Lincoln, Nebraska. Chairman, members of the board, I rise today to speak about process. The City Council has strict rules on what can and cannot be addressed in these post-comment periods, and I will not address any subject that is not allowed to be addressed. But we just got done discussing something that from the day it hit the paper to the day it got to second reading was 94 days. A lot of people complain about bureaucracy. My dad never wanted to do business with governments because they took too long to get through stuff. But currently, there's talk of a proposal that's going to go from the first time it hit the public paper to the day it's going to be voted on. And this is the first city council meeting of any in that whole time period. There was a testifier earlier who named the date that it's going to hit the ballot, even though it hasn't been, this is hard. Any matter which is going to cost millions of dollars should probably take months and not days. Any matter which is going to affect every citizen in the city should probably take weeks and not come through in a very expedited manner, especially when people who are, can't say that either. It's tough with these rules. I think we all know what I'm talking about, and I hope that no one will assume that the city council doesn't get to use its deliberative purpose on any proposal from anybody else in the city government. No one should ever be able to assume the city council will approve any proposal just because somebody's really excited about it. Sometimes, as just happened now, it takes a little while. And that's probably a good thing, because it's probably better to take a little while longer and get it right than have deadlines already discussed in public and be worried about meeting those deadlines as opposed to getting the bill right. So that's my general statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Would anyone else like to speak before the city council?
Am I supposed to state my name and address? Okay. I'm Rob Ravendall. I live at 4140 Jacqueline Drive in South Lincoln. You know, I'm trusting most of you read the paper, so you probably saw the story, and if you didn't, that's okay. It's still out there. I had something very eloquently designed and notes written that I was going to tell you, but I think what you need to hear is that my story happened because I got a broken heart. And I think this needs to come from the heart. I want everybody to understand too, I can probably in some manner relate to every single person on the council. I've owned a business. I bootstrapped a ranching business that was $0 from the government. I'm adamantly opposed to it. I have friends from every walk of life. I'm a conservative Christian, but yet I love my fellow man. And I don't believe in the discrimination of somebody just because the way they live. I completely understand the process of government. I understand our laws, and I understand the way that they come to be and how we determine through the court system what's right and what's wrong. But I got to tell you, what I experienced was nothing short of ridiculous. And it wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't like, oh, we made an error. It was, we're going to do the wrong thing over and over and over and over again. Some of you have asked for the emails. I've shared those with you that I got from the city attorney's office concerning coming to work with a service dog. Quite honestly, I found that the tone of those emails to be nothing short of insulting and obtuse. I did not realize that in Lincoln, if the city and I decide we have a beef on work comp, that somehow I've surrendered all of my civil rights. It's not what our government's for. It's not good use of our money. It's ridiculous. In 2010, the state legislature, excuse me, he's taking care of me. The state legislature passed legislation that made mental injuries in first responders compensatable under the law. Now, attorneys like to argue what every single word means, but at the end of the day, I think most prudent people can read the English language and say, well, I think this is the intent. Let's look at the transcripts. Let's see what the legislature said when they passed this. Let's see what their intent was. In 2015, I ran an incident where a young man, a 3-year-old boy, Charlie, died. And I tell you all with a straight face that every one of the first responders that were there, if we would have known for fact that we could do anything to change it, we would have. And instead, what I got from the city when I said, hey, I need help, oh, there's no law. We'd love to help you, but there's just no case law. Or there's no law. I got on Google and had it in 2 minutes. That's ridiculous. In 2015, that call happened. The policy concerning critical incidents such as that clearly states at the bottom, a firefighter that needs to be relieved of duty due to a critical incident will be treated as an injured firefighter but sent home on sick leave. But if I fell off the roof, I don't have to worry about sick leave. I don't have to go through 12 weeks of FMLA because it's my problem, it's not the city's problem. It'd be one thing if other cities weren't even acknowledging the law. If it, you know, it's never gone to court because it's not supposed to. Does that mean I should shut up? Or I should.
Those are not the words I would use, but your
Sure.
5 minutes has expired, yeah.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yes.
Would you be able to summarize here in 30 seconds or something? Or what?
Sure.
Say, just
So, for example, Omaha. Omaha, if a firefighter, police officer, whatever, says, hey, you know, that messed me up, I need some help. You just treat them like an injured firefighter and get them help. They don't have to waste money on legal battles and charades and just ridiculousness. Not here asking you to intervene on my behalf. What I'm here for is all of you are in a position now, we've got first responders dying simply because they say, you know what, I messed up, I'm a liability to my crew, I'm a liability to my family, and I knew this was my problem and nobody's going to help me. If we had somebody come down here and if our fire department lost 3 firefighters in a fire in the last 3 years, we'd have every expert in the country here telling us how to do it better. But if they die by their own hand, oh, whoa, that one didn't cost us any money. Really? Really? Let's assume that's actually true. How much did it cost to train the replacement? How much did it cover to fill that hole? And then if we use, like, what is the right thing to do, God forbid we actually use a conscience. I mean, really? I'm sorry I'm limited to 5 minutes. I really am. There's a lot of meat on this bone. But what I'm sharing with you now is the current policy at Lincoln Fire Rescue says if, and I'm retired, but if I was a firefighter and I go to an incident and I'm standing there talking to my brother fire or sister firefighter, we come around the side of the rig and I watch a car smoke them on I-80 and turn them into dust. If I have a problem with that, that's my problem. But if I worked for another city in Nebraska, they would just read the law that was written 9 years ago. 9 years. The policy doesn't even say, well, we look at the facts, let us know, we want to look into this. The policy just says, it's your problem, go home and deal with it. Guys, that's not right. If we say that's right, then I'm going to argue that any police officer that gets shot, you know what? Let them fight us in court. Firefighter got burned. Oh, I don't think we really owe that one. Fight us in court. And especially in today's day and time, I mean, PTSD is not a secret. If we say we want the federal government to take care of our veterans with PTSD, but yet we as a city try to ruin our first responders that get PTSD, how do we expect anything to change? It starts here. And this is not, I guess I want to say, this is not a political issue, but this is an issue where everybody on this panel has the ability to use your influence and use your voice to change this today. A guy with Google and a good comprehension of the English language should not be able to smoke your legal department. I mean, imagine me coming to your home. You say, hey, Rob, I just watched TV. I can smoke you at being a paramedic. Holy cow. I'm sorry I went over.
Yeah,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ravindal, did I say that right?
Ravindal.
We do the open comment twice a month, so.
I'll be back.
Opportunities.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to have 5 minutes to address the city council? Ms. Thompson, I'm sorry, I won't give you as much leeway as we gave Mr. Ravindal, but.
Sorry, I've got
Lisa Thompson, 465 South 25th. I am a avid LFR supporter. You all know that. And I just want to follow up on what Rob has said. The situation that he came into changed his life forever. And unless you've been in his shoes, you can't tell him what put him over the top or what should put someone over the top. And I've talked to a lot of our firefighters about, and paramedics about, the stress and what they go through every day because I spend time with them. I want to know how to help them. And they believe that I'm an advocate for them because I talk to them. And I want to leave you with this one statement tonight. I know it's late, so I won't keep you, but I'll be back. One of the paramedics that I was talking to said, you know what? They want us to kill ourselves. The city wants us to kill ourselves because it costs a whole lot less. Think about that statement. That is earth-shattering to my heart. To know that this paramedic that I love, as I do all of them, but I'm especially close to, feels in her heart that we as a city would be better off to just pay the death penalty or the fee, or pay them off, whatever it is, but that you would rather do that than to take them through the treatment that they need to get the help that they need. As you can see, Rob has a service dog. That's been an issue. Why should it? And why should it be in it for an increment of time? Who are we to say how long it takes to get over a traumatic incident? I went on one call where a man had a heart attack. His wife was standing there gutturally sobbing, and all I could do was hold her. That changed me forever. I mean, it just sticks with me. I can still hear that. And that's nothing compared to what they go through. And we have done badly by this man, and other people do not come forward because they know they won't be heard. They can go to the Center of Excellence and send them away. The union helps them get there. But when they come back here, they find those little strands of support with people who might listen to them and know what they're going through. But monetarily, his whole life has changed. His whole life. And it's made by people who have never ridden a rig and who have never seen an incident. We really need to think about that paramedic and what she has said. They just want us to kill ourselves. It's so much easier. And that's just what I want to leave you with today.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Would anyone else in the chamber like to take advantage of our public comment portion?
Mr. Chair, seeing no one responding to your question, I would move for adjournment.
Thank you. I'd like a second.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Christensen to adjourn. Would you call the roll, please?
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
We are adjourned.